Hey community, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Janelle and I'm a registered social worker in private practice. Let's dive in. I've noticed that many folks have a hard time coming to terms with their past trauma, which is very understandable. But let me provide you with an example of what I mean. Let's say you grew up with a narcissistic mother, and now that you're older and you're living on your own, there's been a little bit of distance and you think she's changed. You have hopes that you'll finally have the loving mother who will embrace you and love you unconditionally, which is something that we all desire. There may be moments of kindness, but she's quick to remind you that you're still the problem. And she makes everything about her needs and all the trouble that you've caused her. Instead of facing the reality of who she is and the pain she's caused you growing up, you create this false hope. Your anxiety is high, you're having panic attacks, and you feel extreme sadness. You read a bunch of books on changing your mindset, thinking that you can control how she behaves towards you by changing you. But instead, it keeps you running on a hamster wheel with no end in sight, and the trauma loop continues. What you might not realize is that you're actually leaving yourself open to being re-traumatized by the same people who hurt you from childhood or by new people entering into your life if you don't reconcile and accept your past. I'm going to discuss 5 reasons why people who've experienced trauma and complex PTSD have a hard time accepting their past. Number 1, you hope that your parents will change. If you accept your past, it means that you have to see the reality of who your parents are, which is abusive, controlling, manipulative, and selfish. You have to come to terms with the likelihood that them changing is very slim and non-existent, depending on various factors. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but if your parent is, let's say, a narcissist, the chances are very slim. Deep down, you hope that they're gonna change. You tell yourself that it wasn't even that bad. You may even find yourself making excuses for their behavior. You might say something like, "They had a terrible childhood. How can I get mad at them when their parent was awful to them? I just feel so guilty." It's understandable to have empathy for what your parents went through. It probably contributed to how they parented you. However, it doesn't take away from the pain that you experienced. You are allowed to be angry. You're allowed to confront your past and be sad and wish that you never went through what you did. As an adult child, it's important to see your parents outside of the title of mom and dad. They are people, and sometimes they're not good people. You don't want to face your past trauma because you desperately want to hold on to an image that one day you'll experience loving parents. You might be afraid to confront your emotions about your past because you believe that you'll push your parents away. Or perhaps they'll minimize your experience and make you feel insignificant like they've done most of your life. The reality is, your parents may never change, and they're probably still abusive and critical of you. It's time to grieve your younger self and mourn the loss of what you didn't get to experience. Number 2, you intellectualize everything because you're emotionally numb. You've become so numb to your emotions that you view them as weak, unhelpful, or they give you the ick. People who intellectualize everything, they genuinely believe that they have come to terms with their life and the people around them. In their mindset, they believe that they have everything under control. However, that's not always the case. They're often quite intelligent and they can logic their way out of most things. So when they experience random emotions, it can set them back. The truth is, 9 times out of 10, they haven't completely come to terms with their past reality. Because if they've come to terms, they would be balanced both mentally and emotionally. Emotions would be welcomed and seen as necessary in order to work through various challenges. Without emotions, your negative critic is very high, self-compassion is minimal to non-existent, and you won't be able to grieve what you experienced, and you won't be able to understand the impact that it had on you and that it currently has on you as an adult. These folks can't accept their past because if they do, that means they have to be vulnerable and acknowledge their emotions. Folks who are emotionally numb may view emotions as weak, which means they're weak. They don't want to ever be placed in a position where they lack control and others can hurt them again. Their false sense of control prevents them from experiencing meaningful relationships, and it keeps them stuck in a never-ending trauma loop. Number 3, you're stuck in shame. There's still a wholesome image of family, and some people can't fathom the atrocities that others go through at the hands of family members. This is why some people fear not being believed if they talk about their past. I've had clients say that there is shame around not forgiving their family members. Friends and other family members reduce their pain and experiences by saying, you only have one mother and you only have one father. Or they'll say something like, it couldn't have been that bad. Or, I had it worse, stop complaining. There's a pressure to forgive even though you don't want to forgive. Shame starts to build because you wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just let it go? In addition, shame keeps people in a state of denial. If they don't acknowledge what they went through, then it's not real, and it keeps the shame at bay. People also feel shame for not speaking up or fighting back. They criticize themselves by believing that they were weak. However, the reality is they were children. They were stuck in an environment with an authority figure or authority figures who made them feel helpless and terrified. You can't accept your past because shame makes you believe that you're the problem. Shame can be a challenging emotion for many people to maneuver, especially if it's tied to abuse and family dysfunction. Embarrassment, self-blame, and fear of judgment keeps you stuck in a trauma loop. Number 4, you're stuck in people-pleasing mode. I made a video on people-pleasing and I'll post it in the description box below or in one of the corners above. People-pleasing, aka fawning, is about survival. People fawn as a way of coping when their brain detects danger. When you're stuck in people-pleasing mode, your self-protector is dormant and you continue to engage in self-abandonment. Your response stems from fear. According to Pete Walker, fawn type seeks safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. They believe that the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of their needs, their rights, their preferences, and their boundaries. Now, as an adult, you've become very easygoing and non-confrontational. Essentially, you've become a yes person. You become someone who is considered nice and always accommodating. And this is so much a part of your character that you don't even realize that you are fawning. When you don't acknowledge and accept your past, you continue to merge yourself with the demands and wishes of others. You never get your needs met, and subconsciously, this is your way to stay safe and to protect yourself from others hurting you. You're not accepting your past because you're afraid to confront your pain and the people who caused your pain. The thought of getting angry and setting boundaries is very fearful for you. You've been conditioned to believe that standing up for yourself will have devastating consequences. And perhaps, once upon a time ago, it did. I've often heard, I don't want anyone to get mad at me. What if they punish me? What if they don't like me? What if they hurt me? The fear of your inner child still resides in you. Even when you have moments of brief anger, anxiousness, or feelings of being overwhelmed, the thought of facing your past can be very scary. But denying your reality keeps you stuck in a trauma loop of continued fear and self-abandonment. Number 5, you've convinced yourself that it wasn't a big deal. I've had many clients who've minimized their past trauma. One reason being is because they don't want to lose the people they love. So they've convinced themselves that their trauma wasn't a big deal. Now that you're older, you can tell yourself that the past is behind you. And maybe you can have the family that you've always wanted. Mom and dad aren't abusive anymore, and they're great with the grandkids. However, you notice that you're starting to become a little angry. You look at how your parents are interacting with your children, and it's night and day from your experience. Your kids get the treatment that you desperately craved. You grew up fearing your alcoholic father, and your mom was emotionally checked out. Essentially, you were left to raise yourself. Your dad is now sober, and your mom is now in therapy, working on her emotions. You wonder why you didn't experience what your kids are now experiencing, which is love, acceptance, gifts, kindness, and warmth. You find yourself losing sleep, your appetite is fluctuating, and your anger is now impacting your relationships. You're short-tempered with your coworkers and your partner, and you're directing your anger at everyone else around you except for the people you're actually angry with. The problem is you don't want to face your past trauma because you've created this false reality that minimizes your experience. It couldn't have been that bad. Look at how great they are with the kids. You've created this protective wall that separates you from your true pain. You fear the dynamics will shift if you say something. Maybe you feel responsible for your dad's sobriety, or perhaps you believe that your mom will have a setback if you tell her how you actually feel. Even though you don't have to take on that responsibility, and it's not your responsibility to take on, you convince yourself otherwise. You tell yourself that you don't want to disrupt the peace, but your peace has already been disrupted. You're stuck in a trauma loop trying to convince yourself that nothing is wrong, even though you're suffering every single day. When you don't acknowledge your truth, it can have a significant impact on yourself and your relationships. You are essentially living in denial, which will keep you stuck in a trauma loop. This can include self-blame, minimization, re-victimization, constantly being in survival mode, anxiety, depression, anger, fawning, and the list can go on and on. So, what's the answer? The answer is to work with a therapist who can help you unpack your past with compassion and being open to hearing another narrative. I won't go into the specifics as every person's treatment is different. What I will say is work on creating emotional safety, meaning treat yourself with kindness, respect, and refrain from judging yourself. Challenge your inner critic and become more self-compassionate. If you can't work with a therapist, you can start by reading a few books just to get the process started. I'll put some of the names of the books down below that you can start to read, and I've mentioned them in some of my other videos if you guys have watched some of my videos in the past. I've said this before, this is a journey and not a sprint. Take your time as everyone's path looks different. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. Comment below if you were stuck in a trauma loop. What tools helped you to break free? But if you're currently in a trauma loop, what is keeping you stuck? Check out my previous videos to get to know my channel a little bit better, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Bye for now.